that is in need of colonization. There was also the concept of what is called paternalism, and the idea is that they viewed the Western nations as parents. They were like the parents, and the African nation was like a baby that needed a father. You know, they had to nurture them into the light. Everybody say love and light. Yeah, you know. So that's how they viewed it, and that's why they justified the efforts of the British Empire to colonize many African nations. Let it be clear, it's when we say British Empire, the state and the church were very close-knit. So, I mean, it was with Bible that they, in quote, went to war. It was the sign of the cross that they conquered nations. So in one of his books, Kum entitled the chapter, The Baby Nations of the World, and he described Africa's countries as being in our own hands, as little children whose fate we may make or mar. So basically, they looked at Africa as this continent is like a toddler, a little baby, and we need to go there and take care of them. But we can't take care of them if we don't by force colonize them and bring them under our own government. Of course, the British Empire was very loud on many moral virtues like justice, you know, and treating your neighbor right, and don't killing people, and a strong sense of work ethics. So they just felt that, listen, we the British, we are the fathers of other lands, and so we need to go and take care of this baby continent. Are we still together now? That's the dominant reason why many of the missionaries supported. They of course saw it also as an opportunity. Okay, if we get over into those continents, we can preach the gospel. But in all honesty, people expected better from them, realizing that the dominant reason for the colonial masters' incursions, as it were, was to rule over the people and to take their resources and govern them by giving them their own culture, not necessarily culture of the Christian faith. Because by the time we see the kind of people that they put in charge of those places, like 𝘍𝘠𝘥𝘏, it was not necessarily a Christian. 𝘍𝘠𝘥𝘏, it was supposed to like he had any Christian virtue per se, but they were the people that the British government sent to, as it were, become governors over the territories that we conquered in this part of the world. Are we still together now? How did Britain colonize and rule over Nigeria? That's another question we need to confirm. How exactly did it happen? Was it just by violence? It wasn't just by violence. And that's why many people still blame the missionaries. Because the idea is that when the missionaries came, many of the people embraced the missionary culture. Like, we like these guys. For instance, things like the abolition of the killing of twins, and things like, respecting women, and things like, teaching them to abolish human sacrifices, and teaching them about hygiene and about health. The average African citizen embraced the white culture because of how great the missionaries behaved. And so sometimes even taking over some lands and territories, they didn't need to fight. They just said, well, you people understand that we are white people, we came to introduce you a better way of life, and if you people will agree, we will help you and teach you. And the kings and the obas and just agreed. It was not always by guns, but there were many of those wars or many of those confrontations that ended up in a very bloody way, very, very bloody way, particularly with some revenge missions. At the point in time, some of the towns that did not allow for the British rule killed a couple of foreigners. Those guys came back in full force and killed almost 200 people. They were making statements that we are powerful than you. We are just giving you a chance to play ball. But if you don't want to play ball, all right, we'll play rugby. All right. So there were lots of bloody activities that took place, and violent activities that took place in an attempt to colonize the country. Some kings were overthrown, kings that did not support, particularly kings that were still insisting on slave trade. There was a king, King Kosoko. Yeah, he was insisting on slave trade. They removed him and put his cousin also, because he wanted to continue the slave trade thing. The British were claiming we cannot be here and you continue slave trade. So they removed kings, put in their own people, and all of that. Are we still together here? Tribes were classified. The Ijabus were the most reliable. They fight. When you hear rumors like Yorubas are cowards, you need to know where it's coming from. Yeah, it was because the Ijabus competed very easily, but the Igbos were the most difficult. The Igbos no gree. So it was more bloody on the Igbo side. It was also more bloody because that was, particularly the Delta area too. That was where the waters were. So they would come in their boats and their ships with their weapons and destroy those places that were proving stubborn. But eventually everybody was conquered, especially with respect to southern Nigeria. Are we still following here, please? Now, the reason why it seemed like southern Nigeria was first of all emphasized in the colonization agenda was because that's where most of the palm oil was. So in terms of natural resources, which the British were looking for, it was domiciled in mostly the southern Nigerian territories. But also, northern Nigeria seemed to have a unified government around religion. Southern Nigeria seemed to be more scattered, different empires and kingdoms. It was also like that in northern Nigeria, but they were unified by religion in northern Nigeria. So there was like a general leader based on some of the conquest of Usman Dan Fodio, Sultan of Sokoto. Many of those Muslim leaders had become like the leaders of the northern Nigerian territory. And so there was a central government unofficially. But in southern Nigeria, there was no official central government. So it was just a group of different tribes. So it was easy to conquer them. Do you get the logic? Also, southern Nigeria was uncharted, and what that means is that it was unmapped and not fully planned out. So, describe how scattered that part of the Nigeria was. It was just an accumulation of several, tribes and tongues and cultures. But northern Nigeria was a little bit more planned out, and so it was more difficult to go there because there was a terrain, all right? There was a clear map. And so those who knew what they were doing, the leaders, central government, everybody knew where they were and knew how they arranged themselves. Are we still following here? Northern Nigeria had a centralized religious government which made British authorities more willing to abide by their laws. This is a very important note in understanding why even the missionaries that came alongside the British government did not gain so much entrance in northern Nigeria. But we'll discuss that subsequently in the conversation. Missionaries and British authorities in Nigeria hoped an education-focused Christianity will be able to reform the Nigerian people. So they invested a lot in education. This is also very important to note why Southern Nigeria education and Northern Nigeria education are two different things. They invested a lot in Southern Nigerian education. Schools focused on Christian education and Christian values. Values like monogamy, marrying of one wife. They were instilled in schools. One God. And the Bible as the ultimate authority. All of these things were taught in school. Now, it's important to also note that after a while, the Southern Nigerians were significantly more literate than the Northern Nigerians, of course. But the impact of this was that the jobs available by the British government were only, as it were, assessed by Southern Nigerians. This is one of the reasons why Northern Nigeria and Southern Nigeria is in a battle. Because there was a sense of jealousy. Most of the people that were employable by the British Empire were from Southern Nigeria. And then subsequently, the British Empire themselves began to get scared of Southern Nigerians. Why? Because they had been educated in the British education. They knew stuff. So they were wiser, smarter, more intelligent, more daring, more ambitious. It It is for this reason also that subsequently the British government now began to invest more in northern Nigeria. Because southern Nigeria, Igbelaga was becoming too much. They don't sabi book for there. So they began to do more favors towards northern Nigeria. It is true today that there are many international organizations who are based in northern Nigeria. Many aids, fund release goes to northern Nigeria. It's traced to the fact that the British recognize that, oh, we made a mistake. Oh, these southerners are becoming too powerful because they are smarter. We put a lot of investments in their education. And the northerners don't have as much education, but we also need to hold them firm. Do you get the logic now? So all of those details, I don't want to bore you with them. Let's get into mission history itself. Now, let's start from 1888. As early as 1888, most of the missionaries were more focused on southern Nigeria. Let me read the words of, or let me just quote the Bishop 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘸𝘙𝘦𝘭. He said he was not going to deceive himself trying to win the Muslims. That his goal was to gain the protection of the emirs in order to labor amongst the pagans. So by pagans, we refer to people that practice traditional worship. Are we following here? I beg you, hear me? We heard about Samuel Ajayi last week, and he did a massive job. But you will soon see why he could not extend too much to the northern Nigerian regions. One of which was that by the time he observed how well and formidable Islam was in northern Nigeria, he said there was no need. There was no need. That he will focus on the traditional worshippers. But he needed the protection of the emirs. What I did not mention the other time, even I said in passing, was that by the time Britain wanted to have a handle on northern Nigeria, what they used was what is called indirect rule. In southern Nigeria, they use direct rule. They govern the people directly as it were. In northern Nigeria, they allowed their emirs rule them. Okay, I'll get back to that. I think I will explain it in a more detailed sense. But basically, even the missionaries needed the clearance from the emirs to access northern traditional worshippers. Because the emirs, even though it was under British colony, were still the leaders of the people. The British people gave them that hand that you rule on our behalf. We will oversee, but you continue what you are doing. Continue your religion, continue your practice, and all of that. This is also an important information because many people think that the British government forced Christianity in every zone. You may even say that about southern Nigeria, but in northern Nigeria there were exceptions. But it was an exception. And it was to protect their political interests. They saw that their government was more central, and that if they tried to do everything by forcing their way through everything, there may be too much violence. They, of course, also heard that many of the Islamic leaders had taught concepts like jihad, and so they were ready to die. So they said, okay, we'll rule you, but you also rule. Give us your emirs and your judges. We'll be telling you what to do to develop you economically and politically. But religion, culture, stay with it. Are we still together now? So I was talking about 1888, 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘸𝘙𝘦𝘭 saying he wanted to focus on the traditionalists, but he needed the protection of the emirs in order to labor amongst the traditionalists. There was a survey done in 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘐, and the survey showed that out of the 500 people that were there, 500 people taken, or that the survey affected, as it were, or that the survey that participated in the survey, 40 of them were Christians. So we had a town, 500 people, Muslims, 40 of them Christians. Just to give you an idea of, that was 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘐, and that's where it seemed like 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘍𝑒 stopped progressing beyond that point. But from there, they began to form little or small Christian communities into the north. The there were 2 ordained and 1 lay missionary with a school of between 30 and 40 children. This school was the first Western type school in northern Nigeria. We're talking about 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘎. You need to understand that even as far back as that time, 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘎 was still seen as northern Nigeria. Now we have statements like middle belt. But, well, historically, we had northern and southern Nigeria. About a decade later, the number of Christians in the area had increased tremendously. So just by the schools that Bishop Ajayi Crowther set up and the little education that was going on, it's promoted the values of the Christian faith in that community. Are we still together now? In 1889, it was decided that the European missionaries would form what is called the Sudan Party. It was a missionary alliance, Sudan Party, under Wilmot Brook at 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘎, and they will be in charge of the northern part of the Niger Mission. The southern part of the mission will be under Ajayi Crowther at Onitsha. The decision was reached as a result of the allegations of moral laxity and incompetence that was thrown against or leveled against Bishop Crowther and his co-workers. We read about that last week. They accused him of being too soft. So they said, leave northern Nigeria for us. You face southern Nigeria, leave northern Nigeria for us. So they set up this missionary, as it were, alliance called the Sudan Party. The Sudan Party took over the evangelization of the northern Nigeria from Crowther, and they were made up of many young missionaries. Everybody say young. So they took over, take over generation. Now listen, at this point, let me just give notes of warning to young people who believe that if they take over, they'll do it better. It may not be true. In Nigeria, we say things like, we need youth as politicians. I was telling my wife just today, I think, that I cannot, the way things are going, the current crop of young ministers will be worse than our fathers. Our fathers didn't have social media exposure. Many of their sins were hidden. We flaunt our sin. We showcase our foolishness. I don't see it getting better. We will be worse than our fathers. But we think we need more youth in ministry. Oga youth, you better learn work. Youth. We need more youth in politics. The youngest governor in Nigeria at the last tenure, governor of my state, Kogi State, a white thief. They call him white lion. Goodness me. Mediocrity at its peak. Excellent mediocrity. Youngest governor. The idea that when you are young, you know better, you do better. Nalayo, if you don't learn work, you will be worse than your fathers. And that's exactly what happened here. So this Sudan Party made up of young missionaries. They abandoned Ajayi's Crowther evangelization policy. What was Crowther's policy? Crowther's policy said, listen, let's not directly deal with the Muslims. We know what we'll do. Let's focus on the pagans. Build schools there and establish Christian culture. In a couple of decades, we will have a great percentage, and then we can now confront the Muslims directly. But they felt, nah, that's not necessary. That was too slow. God was also a very wise man. He understood that the emirs were not just religious leaders. The British had made them also geographical or political leaders. So he was very tactful in his relationship with them. He wasn't accusing them of anything. He would just ask for permission. I want to go and preach here. Can we go? They would say, go now. The northern emirs loved Ajayi Crowther. They were okay with him. But when the Sudan Party, young zealots came, they adopted the policy of what is called cultural surrender. What is cultural surrender? They were going to start dressing like the northerners, eating like the northerners, having northern names. So we had many Aishas. Missionary Aisha, her real name is, give me a white name. Behida. Oh, Belinda. All right. So Belinda changed her name to Aisha. It was cultural surrender for the, of course, sake of the gospel. They thought that approach was going to be faster. So they dressed like Muslims, ate Hausa food, they learned Hausa, they spoke Hausa, and they imitated Hausa mannerisms. They thought that this policy would speed up conversion of Muslims to Christianity. The policy, however, ended up a failure, and no single convert was won. Not one. Youth. Calm down. The people that you think are slow, they may know what they are doing. You know? It's people that you think they don't have passion, they don't have zeal. You better calm down and learn and ask questions. Of course, I pity the general body of Christ at large, because Crowder should just have been allowed to continue. But because they accuse him of being too soft and all of that, they just said, focus on Southern Nigeria, we will take over Northern Nigeria. Not one soul was saved. Why? The people, the Northern Nigeria, they saw the policy as very childish. Because they know you are white, and they ask you, what's your name? You say, my name is Aisha. And like, what's that? Come on, what's wrong with you? So they considered the policy very, very childish. Now, of course, there are biblical sentiments around such conversations. Like when you go to the Jews, you behave like the Jew, as it were, or Paul saying that I became orphans to all men. Yes, however, that's why eventually in evangelizing, you must trust on the wisdom of the Spirit. Because what worked for the Jews may not work among Gentiles, basically. Of course, that's a general principle that is in scripture. It's scripture, true. But then, the idea that is just common sense, it may not always work like that. So we must pray. You see, missions is not just thinking about some human wisdom. Say, if we do like this, it will work. We must pray, trust God for supernatural guidance and direction. It may not always be as direct as we think it is. Are we still together here? So the mission was counterproductive. The Sudan party fell off. Many of the missionaries resigned. Many of them died. And that was the end of the Sudan party. But in a more negative light, the Muslims saw that failed mission as a proof of the superiority of Islam over other religions. This was now a source or a means to tighten the stronghold again in the minds of the people that no faith like Islam. Because look at the white people said when they came, they were trying to be like us, you see, because our way is higher. That's how the average northerner began to think. That for the missionaries to dress like us, they must feel that our way was higher than theirs, so we don't need to learn their ways. It completely backfired, and the ripple effect was beyond that generation. Now, let us progress into the period of 1904. And this one, we now had the period of an official colonial rule where Lord Lugard was indirectly ruling Nigeria through, particularly northern Nigeria, through the emirs and the religious leaders there. The emirs would rule over the people and collect taxes approved by the High Commissioner. They would hold law courts according to their religion and culture, and the British government will not interfere. It's why in northern Nigeria, Sharia law is still a big deal. We say, oh, we have our own constitution in Nigeria. Listen, Nigeria is a new concept. I watched the former president of Nigeria, General Muhammadu Buhari, say, I have cousins in Niger Republic. So, of course, I don't know when Buhari was born, but I'm sure that he was not born around 1960. 1960 is how many years? 60. How many? The independence we did, how many years? 65. So Buhari was, how old was he when he died? Buhari was, I think he was in his 80s now when he died. So he was born before the so-called Nigerian project. So as far as it's concerned, the guy in Niger Republic is still his brother, more than the guy in Enugu. Yeah, that's the truth. That's why I say, you know, we young people need to really understand history, so that when you hear some old politicians talk, you understand where they're talking from. They're the ones saying, why is Buhari building train in Niger? He should go and build in Calabar. Or where? Niger is his real hometown. That's where he belongs. He feels that, see, before this British government came and put us together, my real village was around Niger. don't know what goes on in the mind of those old leaders. But I was saying that the law courts subscribe to constitutions that way, as it were, traditional, instead of British rules and British laws and British constitutions. It was indirect rule. Government did not interfere with the Islamic religion. Although Lord Lugard was said to have high respect and trust for Christianity and Christian missionaries above Islam, so he regarded Christianity over Islam, he rigidly refused to impose Christianity on the Muslims. But beyond just imposing it or refusing to impose, he somehow stopped missionaries from entering into those northern Nigerian territories. He was said to have maintained that missionaries would only be allowed to enter Muslim areas at the invitation of the ruler of the area. So if the emir calls you, you can go and preach there. If the emir does not call you, don't go there. The person who took over him, because after a while, somebody was governor, 𝘱𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘰. He took over in 1907. He was more emphatic about the indirect rule. He scrapped the educational program of the CMS. Yeah, last week I made a mistake. I called CMS Catholic Mission Society. Actually, it is Church Mission Society. Church Mission Society, please. So I apologize about that. Are we clear? Yes, so this 𝘰𝘪𝘢, whatever, he planned a new one based on Islam. Because you must understand that Christianity spread through education. A lot of the Christian spreading in southern Nigeria, it was schools, because one of the things Jair Crowther focused on with the next generation, just say, don't forget their fathers and their grandfathers. In the next 10 years, this little boy will be a man, so let's focus on him. And so when they came to learn, they introduced Christian education to them. And that was the idea. CMS planted some schools in northern Nigeria, but this guy came and scrapped everything, and he replaced it with Islamic educational curriculum. Although missionaries were allowed in 𝘱𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘰𝘭, the place 𝘱𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘰 is strangers' quarter, they were not allowed to enter core Muslim areas. The policy also continued with Sir Isket Bells, who took over from Sir Percy. And it continued even until Lord Lugard came back for a second term to serve as governor over the district. Are we still together now? Are we still together, please? I'm sorry the conversation is a lot and it's a bit draggy, but please just learn the lessons, pick the highlights, and run with it. The persecution of Christians by emirs and residents began fully after 1906. For example, Christians were removed to distant places to work for the Public Works Department, and emirs declared that Christians would be denied inheritance and possession of land. I served NYC in Kebbi, and I understand this is a very wonderful tool of subjugation, where you deny another religion land. I saw that I was, unquote, the leader of the NCCF, and the NCCF bought land. The only place they could buy land was on rock. They won't sell land to you. So all the churches were domiciled in a rocky environment. So there are some churches, this is the way the building is. Yeah, because by the time you start laying foundation, you can't drill. My church, that time, I will climb almost a hill, like you would do exercise. And that's the only place churches go in Yauri, in Kebbi State. Anybody that wants to build church, they put them in a very bad area. But the mosques were in great sites in the city suburb. Deliberate attempt to subjugate the other religion. So any Christian that said, or that publicly declared to be Christian, they would tell them that they cannot inherit any land. The sites that was given to Christians in the village of 𝘰𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘰 following Lugard's intervention in the second tenure was a place notorious for tragedy. That same site, the Christian village of 𝘰𝘭𝘰, the population rose to about 161. They were wiped away completely by sleeping sickness. Of course, they deliberately gave them that land so they would go and die there. So these things began to happen. The persecution was not just by sword. They were, and these persecutions were protected by, the British Empire supported it as it were. Because they were trying to protect their own political interests, that we don't want any issue with the emir, so let's allow them to do the way they want to do, although they'll be paying tax to us. Are you following here? Yes, you can begin to understand why now it looks like Christian projects failed across northern Nigeria. This with the issues happening on the net. Okay, even in pagan areas, that is in areas that were not officially Muslims, many administrative officers became hostile to missionaries. For instance, in Kabwe, a successor to the throne became a Christian. Somebody who was supposed to be the next emir became a Christian. The British government removed him. Why? Why did they remove him? He refused to perform pagan rituals that were contrary to his faith. So you see that the British were, in a way, pro-Islam, in a way. And that's why you cannot just say the colonizers and the Christians are the same thing. Nah. Are we getting it here now? Okay. Now let's discuss one event that showed how colonial activity affected Christianity in Kano and Sokoto. Just one event, but it's a little bit interesting, so I'll run through a few narratives. But let me start with the fact that what we call Central Sudan was one of the greatest unreached mission fields in the world. It consisted mainly of 7 important Hausa kingdoms that together formed the empire. Right, so there were 7 kingdoms that formed the empire under Sultan of Sokoto. Each of these 7 kingdoms had its emir, and they were independent in a sense, but they were still sending tributes and taxes to the main king, the Sultan of Sokoto, or the king of Sokoto. Are we following now? One of the tributes they sent was slaves. In those, of course, one of the reasons Britain colonized Nigeria also was to modernize commerce. Means of exchange, cowrie, clothes, agricultural produce, and slaves. So one of the ways they sent taxes was by donating slaves. To keep up with the supply, the emirs every year carried out raids. They went to go and raid pagan towns. Although Sokoto was Sultan's capital, Kano was the larger and more important city. Kano is a very ancient city in the history of the Nigerian conversation. Very ancient, and one of the most civilized, based on the standards at that time. Kano was described as the Manchester of Central Africa. The fact that it was a great manufacturing center. All right, anybody been to Kano before here? All right. Kano. No wonder such a land attracted the attention of Christian people, and many coveted it for Jesus Christ. So private individuals began to make plans on sending missionaries to Kano. There were many failed projects in this direction because it was so difficult to get to Kano. Remember, there were no waterways connecting the cities. So if you had to travel, let's say you want to go from Canada to Kano, it's a suicidal attempt. 4 youthful members of a mission band went around trying to use the Niger route, but neither of them made it alive. A band of 3 young men from Canada who did not understand the implication of their task also attempted the Lagos-Niger route. One died, one was invalidated home, that is, sickness basically sent him back home. The third continued with neither provisions or money, but he was fleeced eventually, robbed, and ultimately found dying in the village of 𝘰𝐾𝐿. That was very close actually. He was almost arrived. And I'll soon show you in details how people move and how people moved eventually from the water areas into those places. But it was a very difficult thing to do. Subsequently, 3 young men were taken to Tripoli. Tripoli is in Libya, to go and learn the culture of Islam and the language of the Hausas, with the agenda or in the hope that they will be sent as missionaries to the northern Nigerian territory. On January 22nd, 1900, their mission started from Lagos. It consisted of Bishop Togwell and the 3 men who were trained at Tripoli. The plan was to travel through the Yoruba forests. Of course, even road network was not talking about 1900. So it's such a risk. So what they did was that they had to carry bags and loads, of course, through horses. So they would employ local, what's called carriers. These carriers would lead them. Say, okay, where are you going? Say, we are going to the other side of the Sudan. Okay, so those ones, the local people knew the road, so they would employ them to carry their bags, and then they will follow them. 1900, January 22nd, they began the expedition, traveling through the Yoruba forest to the Niger. In the first part of the journey, they passed the established mission stations. So we already had mission stations that people like 𝘱𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘮𝘢 had set up in Ibadan, 𝘭𝘎, and then in through 𝘰𝘪𝘢 till they got to Niger. Crossing the river at Jebba, they entered the Sudan. By the Sudan, I mean the northern Nigerian regions. Are we still together now? The party advanced slowly, riding on horses because of the slow carriers. The carriers were a mess. They were in a lot of trouble because sometimes they will be going and they'll just say, we are tired, we want to rest. And the missionaries don't know the road, so they have to wait for them. Sometimes those ones will just leave, go and kiss their wife and come back. And the others ones were just stranded. So it was a very slow journey. Sometimes they will change their mind and say, the money you are giving us is too small. We want more money. And they knew that these people were stranded. Imagine coming from Lagos. Now you are in Kotongora. And the person that is carrying your load say, if you don't give us more money, I'm going to leave here. Sometimes they will actually leave. This was what we're going to look for. Trying to employ another set of carriers. So it was a very bumpy journey, as it were. Now, as the missionaries were traveling, people were hearing rumors. This is important because around that time, there was already a national awareness, by national I mean across territories, that Britain was colonizing Nigeria. It was coming gradually. Everybody take notes, get ready. The British guys are coming. It's a matter of time. So when they saw these missionaries, they are the ones. They may kill them once and for all. They may just commode them. So there were a lot of observations, suspicions about these guys. And every time the missionaries entered into a major town, they noticed people look at them like, they have come. They were assessing them. Did they come with guns? Did they come with knives? But they always noticed that these guys were very just normal guys, no weapon, nothing. So they were perplexed at what exactly are they looking for. Of course, only the missionaries knew why they came. They came for mission work. They were trying to get into Kano and do a massive mission activity there. By the time the Bishop Togwell and his party were entering the Sudan, the Sultan of Sokoto and his emirs were being notified that the Queen of England had undertaken to rule over them. And a strong patrol was already being worked up at the Kaduna River to find a suitable place for the headquarters of Sir Frederick Lugard, the new High Commissioner. On April 6, the party reached the great walled city of Zaria, first capital of an empire to be visited, or rather of an emirate. You remember there were 6 emirates, is that not so? Was it 6 I mentioned? 7. So Zaria was the first one they encountered. And the emir of Zaria was a notorious slave raider. A notorious slave raider. But they welcomed the missionaries and even encouraged them not to go to Kano. That Kano people will not receive them. That they are very proud in Kano. That's what everybody told them, that Kano's guys are very proud, that they will receive them. Of course, Kano was very civilized. It was like I told you, like the Manchester of Northern Africa or Central Sudan. So, but the missionaries felt that they had to go to Kano. They would have stayed and labored in Zaria. It would have probably been a better move, but they were insistent on going to Kano because of what they had heard about the city. Well, the emir of Zaria provided them with a guide and an escort, and even wrote letters so that they were able to present to anybody who challenges them on the way. Missionaries continued their journey towards Kano from Zaria. They estimated it would take them about 8 days to reach Kano from Zaria. The bishop 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘸 had written to the emir of Kano, telling him about his intention to come. The emir of Kano sent messengers telling them not to come. Unfortunately, they missed their way because the emir of Zaria showed them an alternative route. They missed their way. Well, whether fortunately or unfortunately. By the time they arrived at closed territories around Kano, they noticed that there was hostility because the chiefs of those towns and villages did not come to welcome them. Normally, in those days, a white man comes around, the chiefs will come to welcome them. What do you guys want? So how can we make your, whatever, easy and all that? But they noticed nobody welcomed them, so they began to suspect that. They say, well, I don't do. But what the chiefs of the towns claimed was that they were very sick and they were unable to come and visit them. Well, on April 19, 1900, they arrived at Kano. On reaching the palace, the conversation was very stern. The emir asked, "Why have you come? Are you soldiers?" They said, "No." "Are you traders?" They said, "No." "Are you explorers?" They said, "No." "Why have you come?" They said, "We are religious teachers. We are Christians. We have come to ask permission to teach your people." The emir replied very angrily, "We have enough malams." There are malams, of course, teacher in the northern language as well. "We have enough malams of our own. What will they teach?" Just before the missionaries began to answer, the emir shouted, "You must go back. You must go back now. I will not allow you stay in my town." Bishop 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰 urged the emir to have patience. I'm saying this so that you can understand the labors of missionaries. People left Canada, went to Libya for training, passed through forests, arrived at the place you're supposed to work, they say they don't go allow you. When we say do evangelism, we say it's stressful. The spirit of 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰 will stand up and say, I wish you came in my time. I wish you came in my time to know what stress is. Bishop 𝘍𝘰𝘭𝘭𝘰 urged the emirs to have patience. We have come from a far country. We have been traveling several months, meeting with many difficulties and dangers, spending so much money. Now we have reached this great city, and you ask us to go back? What will the world say? The emir was not moved. He told them that they had 3 days to leave his city. And that if they want to preach in the city, they must go to Sokoto and obtain permission from the Sultan for the preach in the city. Well, the bishop tried to say, okay, fine, you reach the Sultan and tell them that we have come. He said, no, go yourself and obtain permission by yourself and come back if he gives you permission. They kept them in a very small mud house with temperature of 95 degrees inside. Told them you have 3 days to do your business, and afterwards, whatever your eyes see, like you go cause them. They told all the women that they will be killed if they gave the missionaries food. And so these guys were really in a mess. Eventually, April 27th, they passed out of the gates of Kano and set their faces towards Zaria. They wanted to go back to Zaria. Unfortunately, the report had gotten to the Sultan that Zaria people entertained, so they killed the leaders. Yeah. And one leader that if you see these people, just tell them to come out. They must not enter. And of course, it was phobia because of the British guys coming. So anybody they saw, they suspected. Anybody that came from abroad, they said, yeah, maybe they're spies. Are we getting it now? This is a very interesting story I had to share so that you understand how the rumor of colonial rule also affected the entrance of some of the missionaries. Eventually, they had to settle down in that same town, Gyeku, and everybody died there, basically. It was another failed mission. Okay, I need to round up here, so let me just say one or two things. In comparing the northern and southern parts of Nigeria, there are a few other things to note with respect to why it seemed like the southern part was more productive for the Christian missionaries. Let's first of all discuss the fact that most of the northerners were always moving. There was this issue of, because they were cattle rearers, they were not settled. So there was a lot of movement. It was not like many settled adults. And so that also, in some ways, affected, building schools, building hospitals. They did that. There are many things I had to skip. There were a lot of hospital evangelism that failed. Many of those outside guys, once they got well, they got back to Islam. Again, it reminds us that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. It's not charity. Charity can be tools, they can be aids, but the real power of God is the gospel. Are you following here? Another issue was that many historians believe that the British focused on southern Nigeria because of the guilty conscience that came from the slave trade. It was discovered that more than 80% of the slaves that the British guys took from Nigerian regions, more than 80% were Igbo guys. So it felt like, oh, we have wasted this guy's life. Let us go and do gospel in that place and build schools and build hospitals and help them, because we really suffered this environment. Are you following here? Was there slave trade in the northern Nigeria? Yes, but it was mostly the Arabs that were trading slaves around that area, not necessarily the British. So when the British came and took over Nigeria, they said, let's focus on southern Nigeria. Now them we really suffer past. It's also noteworthy to mention that because, of course, that's where the waters were domiciled, it was easier for them to enter southern Nigeria. I mean, just step down from their ships and boats and then do whatever they wanted to do. Okay, there's also the fact that the northern culture did, because of Islamization, we're very, of course, skeptic about inventions. That's the idea of Boko Haram. The idea is Western education is sin. That's the meaning of Boko Haram. It's a very strong philosophy in northern Nigeria. So they were anti-innovation, anti-invention. Anything that introduces us to a new life, they don't like it. And because most of the missionary activity came alongside the idea of, our culture, our way of life, our healthcare system, our education, the northern guys absolutely just did not embrace it. We also have the issue of ex-slaves or former slaves, because most of the slaves were from southern Nigeria. I mean British slaves. When they were released to Sierra Leone, Freetown, most of them, when they released them to go back to preach to their hometown, where did they go? Southern Nigeria. There were not too many northern Nigerian slaves. So when the bulk of missionaries were from former slaves, it was only logical that former slaves went back to southern Nigeria areas to preach. So we had more gospel laborers in southern Nigeria because there were much more slaves from that area too. Do you get that now? I think that will suffice for today. That's basically the conversation. If you have a question, please ask. Anybody with a question while we take an offering? Please pass me my purse in the back. If you have a question, please ask. I'm not an historian, but maybe I'll give you some clues. Please, all the things I'm saying, be double checking and be ensuring that you confirm so that you don't just have limited idea of what we discussed. You can also go and do fuller researches. All of these things, well, not all, but some of them are available on the internet. Some of them you have to buy books to really get exact details. I mean, there's no questions, so I'll go ahead with the announcements. On Friday, we'll be in prayers, 5:30. On Sunday, we have a guest because of the pulpit exchange across Rema Chapel installations. We have a pastor from Abeokuta coming around, Pastor 𝘍𝘭𝘭𝘰𝘭𝘭 coming around from Bekuta is going to be here. So please get ready for that. And let us create a wonderful atmosphere for our guests. I'll be somewhere in Ibadan. Remember Tapula Kobo. That shall be Sunday by the grace. Are we clear on that? Next week we'll continue the conversation. Church history seems not to have an ending, especially if we want to follow timelines. I was really hoping to discuss Pentecostal history, but we have not even entered 1960. So there's a whole lot to discuss. But I look forward to discussing the Cherubim and Seraphim movement next week and the CAC movement. Hopefully we can get at that juncture. And that's very important because many people think that our Pentecostalism in Africa was invented or brought by the whites. Meanwhile, many of the things we do as Pentecostals were things that were indigenous. Babalola was no white man. The founder of Cherubim and Seraphim was no white man. And they had their own work with God in signs and wonders. Fortunately, there was not too much documentation. That's a problem with the Nigerian church. Many things that should have been documented, were not documented. But we'll do our bit to get some lessons from the little resources available to us. Are we clear? Yes, see you on Friday. Bless you.